Good evening. We'll go ahead and call the September 11th, 2023 regular meeting of the Lakeshore Hospital Authority to order. And first on the agenda is a public hearing, the first public hearing for fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Mr. Williams, are you going to go over that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your agenda packet, there are about 7 pages related to the fiscal year 23-24 budget of the Lakeshore Hospital Authority. And I would simply remind the trustees that the adoption of a budget for you is a legal requirement under Florida statute. And as such, there is a specific process that we're required to follow. And so in order to make sure that we dot the i's and cross the t's, we always prepare a separate agenda for that purpose to make sure we do not omit anything that is required of us. And so the first page of the 7 that I've given you is the agenda that I would highly recommend that we follow to adopt our budget. And again, it's just to make sure that we put the right words in the minutes and that we do the things that we're required to do under law. The second page is a budget summary for the 23-24 budget. It tells us 2 things. One is we are proposing a balanced budget, and it also is telling you that the proposed expenditures under this budget are actually higher than the current year. They're 8.9% higher, and we will discuss that as we go through. I remind you now, that's not revenue, that's expenditures. So that's basically what you can take from the budget summary. And I think all the trustees are aware that the authority has 3 separate funds. We used to have as many as 5, but we reduced it to 3 a couple of years ago. So you have these 3 funds of which all the expenditures and income are added or expended out of. So the first of those funds we call the Healthcare Services Fund. This is basically where we would pay for, well, we used to pay for hospital services. We used to pay for the physicians. We used to have all of these expenses in the healthcare fund. And of course, this fund got considerably less after the hospital closed. It is the one fund within out of the 3, which pretty much the one I call this is anybody's guess. There's not a lot here to base on actual. We have a plan. We hope the plan gets implemented for the next coming year, but I'd be the first to tell you in this particular fund, we make a lot of assumptions and a lot of guesses. So having said that, what we've done for the coming year is we have put $400,000 into indigent care. Now you will notice that in the current year, we budgeted 200. I think we've actually spent something like 25 or 30. So you might ask, well, why did you do that? Well, we still have plans to have primary care and other things, which hopefully, as soon as we can get the main hospital issue resolved, we can address. So our spending plan is to have more expenditures in this area next year. And that's the reason we plugged the 400,000 in. You will also notice up on the income side, 241,000 in revenue, 240 of that is from interest income. We are not levying much at all of a millage. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's still the 1/10,000th of 1 mil. But we have been much more successful in our interest income than in years past because of decisions you made last year about investing in treasuries. So the budget is balanced. The only thing that I would mention here is we did put the 400 in. Would it be wrong to go back and put 30 in? No. Would it be wrong to leave it at 200? No. But it is supposedly a plan of what your proposed expenditures are. And so we're in hopes that if we can get past the hump with the hospital, we can have a few pieces fall in place and we can improve upon what we do in terms of indigent care. The next fund is the Building Administration Fund, and this is obviously the one that gets talked about most often because this is the fund that we're using to pay for the upkeep of the now closed Lakeshore Hospital. And as you can see, for the coming year, we are proposing $705,000 in expenditures. There's a number of various things that could happen to impact that. One immediately is actually on your agenda tonight, and that deals with insurance. So depending on what you may decide on the insurance, that number could easily go down over $100,000 tonight. But that's a separate item, and if that does happen, we'll have it corrected by the time we have our second hearing on the 25th. We pretty much in this budget based everything on what actual current expenditures were, or what we thought actual expenditures would be based on any information we may have. But if you're to continue to operate it for a full year, we estimate it would take around $705,000 at current expenditures. And then the third and last fund is the operating fund. This is the fund where all of the line items to do the business at hand are paid from, anything from the light bill to accounting services to salaries for employees and et cetera. We put all the rest of the interest income in here. So if you add those two numbers up, you can see that we're estimating we'll generate over $500,000 in revenue from the cash reserves of the authority. You will also notice on your printout under accounting services, your sheet doesn't show an expenditure. I'm not quite sure why that happened because it should be a $26,000 line item. And it actually tallied in the total. So the total won't change because it's already reflected in there. It's just that for whatever reason, the line item didn't print out. So we're not proposing to get by without any accounting services. In fact, we bumped it up $1,000. It should be $26,000. The only other line item that I believe should be mentioned is wages. You will notice that we reduced wages. For the most part, that's due to my contract. I'm eligible to work up to 52 hours every 2 weeks. I do not work and bill near that. We normally have budgeted for the full amount under the expectation I may reach those hours, but I don't. So we've reduced that. The other thing that I would want you to know is this budget does include a 5% cost of living adjustment for both Sonia and Cynthia. So that is covered in that number as well. But even at that, we've reduced it about $44,000 for a total in the operating fund of $414,600. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made in a couple of these funds. There's no doubt a number of things could happen that would impact this and most likely will. And if this budget is adopted as presented, the way that would be addressed is through budget amendments at the time they become necessary. So, Chairman, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Obviously, you have for an agency your size, a lot of cash assets. Were it not for the operation of the hospital, the interest income on those cash assets would more than pay for operating costs of the authority. I think that's pretty obvious when you look at it, and it goes a good way to paying for them even now with the hospital. So having said that, I'll answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, we'll go back to the agenda and I will turn this back to you.
And just so Mr. Robinson doesn't get on to me, I'm gonna go back and read this first paragraph that I was supposed to.
Okay.
Told to read verbatim. For the proposed millage rate of 1/10,000th of a mil or 0.0001 mils is a rollback rate for 2023-2024. The purpose of the levy is to maintain the legal standing of the Lake Shore Hospital Authority as a taxing authority. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for the overview. Is there any comments on the budget?
Mr. Williams, I got one question. You lost me under the budget summary,
Yes, sir.
under the healthcare services,
Yes, sir.
indigent patient care. You used the figure 400,000. I'm seeing 350 on.
Yes, sir. If we go to the healthcare services budget, we put the 400 in.
Yes, sir.
We do anticipate some revenue, which we did not completely show in miscellaneous income, which is where the number come from. But the 350 is based on your actual cash.
Okay.
I made the comment earlier. I said Don Kennedy will catch that, y'all, which is good.
Questions or comments on the budget? Well, the public input on the budget or millage rate at this time.
Got to open that hearing, Mr. Chairman.
The public hearing is now open. Are there any comments from anybody in the public on the budget or the millage rate? We're not adopting anything tonight, right? Or do we?
Yeah, you need to adopt the millage rate and then adopt the budget. Yep.
Entertain a motion to adopt the tentative millage rate of 0.0001 mils for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Anybody?
So moved.
We've got a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the tentative budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal years as follows. Patient care fund, health services, 10,140,000. Buildings administration fund, 800,000. Operating fund, 9,305,000 for a total of $20,245,000.
So moved.
Got a motion,
Second.
2 seconds. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. So this time we will close the public hearing. The final budget hearing will be held in 2 weeks on Monday, September 25th at this location at 5:15 p.m. We'll move back to the regular agenda. Any staff or trustee additions or deletions to the agenda and or consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, staff has no additions or deletions.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
The motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Public comments, Ms. Lindley.
I would like to reserve my comments after the new business is discussed because I don't know what's going to be discussed. And I want to make a comment after that has been presented.
Any other public comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion carries. New business,
Just by way of introduction, Mr. Chairman, of course, in your agenda packet is a memo which outlines the purpose of this particular item on the agenda. We discussed at the last meeting that there were really 3, and it turned out to be 4 items that if we could address those, as a staff, we believe that we could bring a somewhat quick closure to getting you an agreement for the use of the old Lakeshore Hospital. And so that memo is somewhat the agenda for discussion. And at your request, we did invite representatives from Meridian, and both Don and Lauren are here with us. And so hopefully we'll be able to walk through these various issues and discuss them, and you can make decisions accordingly.
Mr. Chair, before we go any further, can I make a statement?
Sure.
Okay. Prior to the discussion of the Meridian matter, I want to disclose that I am aware of the issue of the reverter clause on one of the lots requested by Meridian. I am disclosing that my husband is a member of the Masonic Lodge of Lake City, and I am a member of Eastern Star. Although I'm making this disclosure, as to my husband being a member of the Masonic Lodge and I being a member of Eastern Star, neither me nor my husband will receive any private gain or loss related to the issue of Meridian's request for the hospital building. Accordingly, I do not have a voting conflict as to Meridian's request for the hospital building. Okay.
You all, how do you want to do this, Bill?
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's really your prerogative. Don and Lauren are both aware of the 4 questions. We've discussed these in our weekly meetings. And so, and actually, I invited Don to review this before I published it. So everybody's on the same page. But I do think if there is some meeting of the minds on these 4 issues, we can proceed with the process fairly quickly. So we can address them in any manner the trustees feel are appropriate.
So to me, number 1 is kind of the biggest one. Would it make sense to everybody if we kind of start with number 4 and move our way up the list and work through these?
I'm fine with it.
So the 4th item, Meridian has submitted a list of currently owned Lakeshore Hospital Authority properties that have been requested to be transferred as part of the agreement. The trustees are requested to look at these properties and indicate if they agree or not.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I brought this board and I realize it's not the biggest scale, but hopefully you can see it. This is the current Lake Shore Hospital. It sits here. This is the parking lot northeast of the hospital. These are the 3 lots which are, this particular lot contains the helipad. These 3 lots are all east of the lake. And the other piece requested is the paved parking lot between our office, the building we're in here, and what we call the PT building. And of course, the 2 lots were requested because given the number of employees, it takes both lots in order to provide a parking space for that number of employees. Don, did I misrepresent that in any way? Hospital, parking lot, the acreage here east of the lake, and the paved parking lot between the authority administrative building and the physical therapy building. That is what they have requested as part of the conveyance. And any questions pertaining to that would be to Don or Lauren.
I have one that I think would maybe be more towards you.
Okay,
The paved parking lot between our office and the PT building.
yes.
That wouldn't leave much parking if somebody were to go into that PT building at some point. So,
Well, my thought process has always been that if we're fortunate and that we're able to have the other buildings leased and occupied, we are probably going to have to develop for parking the lot just to the north of us. The lot that's here. which would give us 3 very large parking lots, and it would accommodate the use of all the buildings.
Yeah, point out the parking lot in question that Shriners Masons gave. In case someone doesn't have.
Here. This would be the Masonic parking lot that Miss Laurie referred to.
I would. I mean, if the trustees are. Okay with the request for that property, my only request would be. The lot north of us rather than the paved parking lot. To the east of us, because that parking lot. Adjacent kind of goes with that PT building. I would rather. What I'm saying is I would rather. Have the lot north of this building go instead of the lot east of this building.
Don, you like to comment on that?
From a lot standpoint, as long as we have access to it and we're able to use it, who owns it, I think is somewhat inconsequential. As long as there's an agreement between Meridian and the Lake Shore Hospital Authority for the use, there's just no way we're gonna fit the cars for employees and clients in the lot that's directly to the north. My thought is we need to make some of those spaces available for patients and visitors, which means we're gonna have people traversing back and forth. I would worry about the back in the dark unless we lit it better. And that's just thinking of our employees and how that would work out. Then because it's 3 shifts, you're probably gonna see well over 100 folks just in staff during the day. And then it sort of shifts at night, but that transition becomes an issue of when people come and when they leave. We can certainly work it out.
I would just be concerned about handcuffing ourselves.
Yeah.
For the future of the PT building. There's no
And
part.
we don't even have to own it, as long as we know that there's universal access for folks from all the buildings.
Any other questions or comments on that item for Mr. Savoy or Bill?
I don't have a problem with that. As long as that lot would be open use.
If we owned it, it would be open usage. If you had business here, at any of the facilities,
Okay.
patient, visitor, otherwise, for any of the buildings. And we'll maintain it, we'll like it like we do our other properties. And we also agreed, once we were in operation, to have security, so we will make sure that security. By way of golf cart, or some
Well-
vehicle is moving around on the entire campus.
Okay, but also the lot that Brandon was talking about. Your daytime employees could feel comfortable there.
It could, I believe, I haven't looked back there.
Yeah.
So I'd have to look at it, but.
I mean, you might want to provide a golf cart to ride them back and forth, but. That's not as far distant as parking is in a lot of facilities.
I hear it. The only question I worry about is at night.
Yeah.
And on the weekends, but we shouldn't have a problem with parking on the weekends.
Well, at night, to be able to park in front of the hospital is not a problem either.
It just depends on shifts and when people leave. We run into that now. At a lot of
Yeah.
our facilities, because the nurses and the techs and others, they're coming in, checking in, the other folks are still there, they're taking up the spots, then all of a sudden it gets quiet.
Yeah.
But I think it's all work.
Kennedy, do you have?
Don, you threw me a curve.
Oh,
8 months ago, when we were talking about this. Has the concept changed any?
no,
Then you use the term parking for patients. I didn't think the severely psychiatric patients would be driving.
well, we'll have, the way we have the floors laid out, you're gonna have family, you're gonna have others. We're opening up primary care there, that will be patient parking.
Primary care, I understand,
There
but
will be a pharmacy there.
so we're still good with that concept.
Yes,
Okay. And I haven't been privileged to any of the meetings that have gone on, and I assume before we get the cart ahead of the horse, this tonight that we're doing is discussion regarding the building itself. And not the concept. Mr.
I think it's,
Robinson,
it's the
It's
deal.
4 issues that have to be really resolved.
Right.
Finalized.
before we get into the,
Actual, and we've been working with Don, Todd and I have. and
right,
I think we can work out most of the issues, but we gotta know, first of all,
I agree. That's certain,
certain things
yeah, Brenda, yeah,
before we spend the time and the
Yes.
money pounding those out.
okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to make sure that from a staff perspective, I understand. What I'm understanding is that Meridian and the trustees are in agreement that if the other issues can be resolved satisfactory, we need to have an overall campus parking requirement that would allow for the amount of traffic, trips, daily parking and et cetera, but we don't necessarily have to deed that parking. We just have to make sure that it's accessible and available. Am I understanding that right?
I don't think we can get a certificate of occupancy without enough parking based on square footage and what we have planned.
Yeah.
That's been pretty universal.
Yeah, I agree.
If everybody has access to the parking lot, I think that's probably, I'm more thinking about that. We'll put the parking too far away, it might turn into a problem with the city in terms of permitting. The perfect world is easier to give them this one, but I would just say, as long as they let us use it for our needs and Dale's right, we're gonna have to make another parking lot anyway. I don't have an issue with that lot going with the request, as long as they don't mind us using it on occasion until we can get the north side of the PT building turned into parking as well.
Anything else on item number 4? Item number 3, Meridian is requesting that Lakeshore Hospital Authority continue to maintain the hospital at current levels and conditions until all assessments and renovations necessary for occupancy to be completed. Meridian is currently requesting this continued maintenance for the period ending on or before December of 2025. So we need to know, have a discussion and see if this is something that the board is open to or having a discussion, Mr. Williams.
Well, just to give the trustees some background and history here of how the discussions have went between staff and Meridian. First of all, look, we acknowledge as a staff and we realize that this is an issue for trustees. I mean, you're custodians of public money and we're spending money and we really don't have a benefit to show for that. And this would be a continued expenditure of that money. In fact, assuming that the budget you just reviewed is adopted on the 25th, $700,000 a year. Okay, so let's just call it $1.5 million over 2 years. What we think you should weigh against that, however, is this. If we tear the building down, the estimates we have are at least $1.5 million, if not more. So based on that and trying to come up with a way that we could continue to have this discussion and move forward with this, we have had discussions with Meridian about a guarantee or an assurance. So for example, let's say that you did agree to this and 12 months into it, you spent $700,000 and Meridian decides they don't want to go through with the project. They're still in a due diligence period. They decide for whatever reason, they don't want to go through with it. So we've asked, look, you can't expect the trustees to continue to spend money without them having some good assurance that the project is going to occur. So can we have some form of bond? Can we have some form of resolution from their board? Can we have some form of guarantee that makes you feel good enough to know that should that happen, and nobody expects or wants that to happen, but should it happen, then the trustees would know that they're no worse off financially and you're no further in the hole than you would have been. So we know that's a big ticket and a big ask. And we've told Meridian that up front, that the trustees were wanting to rid themselves of hospital expenses. We said that up front. But this kind of gives an opportunity for this to move forward. If you can accept that logic, and if Meridian is willing to make such guarantees or assurances. And that's kind of where we were at with item 3. And by the way, Richard's not here, but Richard said I had permission to tell you that he was in favor of that. He felt that that was fair and reasonable.
So. Can't really make my point or ask my question without jumping forward just a little bit to part of number 2. Where Meridian has provided a corporate resolution authorizing the expenditure of up to $10 million to make the necessary improvements. We've heard a bunch of different numbers over the last year, all of which exceed $10 million to renovate the building to where it needs to get. So I guess my concern is June of 2025, that $10 million is expended and the project's not complete. We can't get, that it's not going forward. What do we do with that? I understand that
Well,
we would be guaranteed that.
this may be more on my lack of understanding, but I think when they actually go in and start to physically renovate, the clock stops there. It won't necessarily be that entire period of time. We're just giving them up to that to do their due diligence, get their plans ready, get their permits in place, get their contractors selected, do those things. And then when they start, let's just assume for the point of discussion, let's say that happens in December of 24. Then the agreement that you have would say, okay, it's yours, but it's official, it's transferred.
Because this, back to number 3, it says, continue to maintain the hospital at current levels and conditions until all assessments and renovations necessary for occupancy could be completed. So are we talking about until the day that you move in, or are we talking about till you start construction?
So this was a request from Meridian. One of the things we've heard a lot about, we've had a lot of engineering, we've done a lot to prepare ourselves for the building. It is our belief that we can renovate the building in stages over a period of 3 to 4 years. And quite frankly, with contractors and other things, we're gonna have those opportunities. So what we were looking for is some relief, because we know we're gonna have to spend a ton of money in the building to get it to where it can be. But we'd like to do it in stages such that we can get a CO, certificate of occupancy. That's gonna take a little bit of time. My hope is that you will support us through that till we get the CO. At that point, we'll move in at least 3 programs, major programs. So there's the roof, there's a couple of other things we need to do, and we'll stage our way into that. When we get a CO and we can occupy the building is when that would come down. And this is something we'd like to put out there. Remember, we'd be taking over the building, not knowing some of the conditions, and it could be, we don't know how long till we can get a CO based on, we've had conversations of the HVAC can and will continue. Is it efficient? Absolutely not. But can it continue for 4 years? And we may go on and do that and run it and occupy it, but then stage it into our capital operating campaign annually as to when we're going to do certain things. But we know we got to do the roof right away. We know in the last 12 months, I've been up there and seen some real damage on the 4th floor. We don't know how far that's penetrated and what we have to do to remediate that, mold and some other things. We'd really like to get started. First floor looks in really good shape. That's really the start with some of the community things and other pieces. But when that building is eligible for CO, that comes down right away. Could be sooner. We don't need to do it. Alternatively, on top of $10 million, Meridian is going to have to invest another, at least if it goes 2 years, another, to your numbers, Dale, another 1.4, 1.5 million. It's getting to be a pretty expensive proposition. Can we do it? I'm sure we can. We'd like your support in the project.
Don, the only thing I would say, and if you get the CO, that means you've already completed certain renovations. It's gonna be hard for the trustees to commit to anything and everything that may happen that's related to maintenance of the building while it's under construction.
Mhm.
So the only way I would know to do that, and this might be more for our discussions as part of the agreement, they're gonna have to cap whatever their contribution would be. Because what if a contractor's in there and something goes awry with the contractor, you know? I don't think the trustees could be responsible for making that whole. So,
We can work that out with legal. and,
yeah, to keep it till the CO is issued, to me is more difficult. I'm not saying it can't be done, I'm just saying it's a little more difficult. But I do think at the very least, it's going to cap what the trustees would be willing to spend, assuming they're even willing to go forward with that.
And again, this was a request. We really haven't negotiated it. We'd love to sit down
Yeah.
and talk to you about that. Maybe a graduated schedule. There are plenty of things we could do. We sit down and discuss it, but we haven't yet.
How does that work from a liability standpoint? I'm sorry, I'm dying.
No, I was just
But
about to say,
I can't-
insurance, I don't want to cover anyway.
But if you're renovating the building and we're paying. Part of our monthly overhead, one of the big line items is the insurance on it. I'm trying to figure out how that's even gonna work, if our adjuster's even gonna let that happen. If you guys are going. In my mind, it was notice of commencement. We wash our hands of it, from the day you guys file, so that any sub that even begins work. That would be the target date that I'd try and hinge for. So you draw your notice of commencement, work has begun. The hospital authority is out of the maintenance business. That was, best case scenario, what we're hoping for.
Mhm.
My concern is if you have ongoing construction inside the building and we're going all the way up to CO, what part of that, that makes me concerned just from a liability standpoint of like what Dale's saying is if you have a sub that runs awry or worse yet, there's an injury in the site. Now who's responsible? Which liability flat cover does that run under? Does that make sense? I feel like that's messy.
I don't have a problem with sitting down with staff and we could work that out.
Okay,
One of my biggest concerns is the security.
Yeah.
And the cost associated with security, but we do a lot with insurance right now. So adding that in and working that process through once we take ownership of the building. And some sort of graduated schedule that we can go work on. My biggest concern, we get into the building, we find out it's gonna take a lot longer than we thought, even to get to operating. And we wanna be transparent and work with you guys on it. Again, when we put this contract together, I think July, we'd love to sit down and work through some of those issues. But it is an ask. It certainly could be modified and we're happy to work with you on that. I mean, you bring a good point.
I'm just concerned that we could agree to anything. And then 2 months later, our insurer comes up and says, hey, we're dropping you or we're quadrupling your coverage. And that could be a zero sum game. I would think your general contractor wouldn't allow, or I don't even think their insurance would allow us to be, maybe they would love that, by the way, if there was somebody else to share the blame. But I don't know if our guy's gonna let us. Does that make sense? That,
Well, that was what I was about to say was the insurance. When we get to that on the regular agenda. I made my thoughts known last week, but I'm not in favor of paying for anything other than liability insurance.
but I don't even think if we convey,
I don't think we can have the liability and
it sounds like it might just be a. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Don. I think it to me is more along the lines of, hey, can y'all help with X, Y, and Z?
Mhm.
As opposed to, because in order for them to even get the permit, they're gonna have to show, ownership, notice of commencement, all that document, that's all gonna show ownership anyway. So the building's gone in terms of the conveyance. So I don't even know where our insurance or carrying costs would even go. But what's the number for the insurance right now? It's something. dramatic.
300 is what it was at
Yeah.
your last meeting. It'll be different than that tonight. When we get to it, but
Is it a quarter?
no, 300 and
AM. not the end of the world. I just don't know if it's even gonna be allowed for us to, because I don't even think they're gonna let us continue that policy on. As far as like, helping with security, have a maintenance guy there to keep systems, critical systems running. Like, keep
that's
the
biggest
air on.
thought From my perspective.
I don't see. To me, I personally don't have an issue with having a maintenance guy from our hospital authority transition them into the building. And if that transition takes 5, 6, 10 months during construction, to me, that's not a big ask. It's the elephant in the room is the $300,000 of insurance that I don't want to pay if I don't have to. But if I can provide support while our guys transition out, that to me is not a big deal of just being a helping landlord take this over. I don't have an issue with that. Does that answer? Is that clear enough?
So the issue would be, they would have to buy the insurance
I think they would.
and,
I don't think they can get around it. I don't think our insurance is going to let us have active construction.
well, I don't either.
Yeah.
But they would buy the insurance to cover the whole thing.
Upon conveyance, what I'm
Upon-
saying is,
yeah.
we have staff now that's.
Hello? They would buy the insurance.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, we would continue to maintain as we have been until they're clear.
Yeah,
Okay,
in the transition period, like,
Yeah.
mow the grass, keep the air running, that sort of thing. While you're doing, while they're doing exploratory, I guess, architectural engineering work,
but
mold
they would have
remediation.
to have the insurance.
We gotta have
Yeah.
something, but I don't think it's gonna be a whole building policy.
That was up to them.
Mr. Robinson, do you have?
Yeah, there are things that can be done. For example, we can require that they carry a level of insurance that satisfies us and make us an additional insured
Yeah,
insofar as it relates to their operations of the hospital while they're renovating. There are things like that. So, and this thing started, I think, on two simple things. There can be caps on time and money that will be spent as a part of the contract as well. But we can draft around things like liability with the clauses I mentioned, which are not uncommon in commercial contracts, for example. But the decision you're going to have to make, I think, as trustees, and I don't want to be speaking out of my place because I'm not one of this august body, but you've got to decide how long and how much you will spend.
Well, I agree with that part specifically because, if you go back, we had a couple other proposers, FGC and Disney World, that wanted us to give them the building and $10 million or whatever it was to renovate. We said, no. Is there anybody that has a proposal? If we give you the building and wash our hands of it. So I like the point. I understand the point that if we decide tonight to tear the building down, we're gonna spend $2.5 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever it is, to demolish the building. I just don't want us to get so far out there. There should definitely be a cap on how much we're willing to spend or how long we're willing to spend. I agree with that 100%.
Okay, they've proposed the date of December 2025. Is that correct?
I think that is when you're hoping to have a CO for the
Okay.
first part.
Okay, we know how much we have spent in the last fiscal year in maintaining that building. We could commit to spending just that same amount for 2 years.
Minus insurance.
yeah, that's the insurance is just the big one.
But they're getting the insurance.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe
I
that's
think the point is that they know how much it's gonna cost. He's not giving, I don't think Don's gonna give up the ground. I think he wants to.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to remind the trustees on the insurance portion. course, we have Bruce and we have Todd, with anything related to insurance, we run through, but because you're a member of FMIT, Florida Municipal Insurance Trust, we have access to risk managers. And, you know, these things go to risk managers and they do exactly what Trustee Douglas was saying. They assess the risk and they tell us whether we can accept it or not. And then based on that, decisions are made. I can almost guarantee you, you're not going to be able to insure a building that another party is renovating. I almost can assure you that somehow we're going to have to work something out with Meridian where they assume that risk through builder's risk or whatever other coverages may be required. Heck, we're having trouble insuring a vacant building. You know,
Yeah, I think it's different though, if it turns it into an active
Yeah,
construction site, the rules change. And
well,
that's-
and you can
Probably-
insure it under a different class of insurance.
Yeah, the rules change there.
But the concept, I think, is important here. Again, this is a big ask because staff is very much aware of what has been said in the past. But in discussing it, we felt like it would be somewhat revenue neutral if we could, you know, somehow offset what you would spend by saving the demolition cost. And then, of course, then the concern would be you would get to a point where somebody would no longer want to do the project and you have already spent that money for whatever period of time.
Yeah.
So we were discussing with Meridian some form of assurance or guarantee that that money could and would be reimbursed where the authority would be kept whole. Now, we did not conclude those discussions. We got to a point where it was mute unless the trustees wanted to consider, because of the offset of demolition, allowing us to have that path of conversation. And therefore, that was the reason it was added to the agenda.
Is the consensus that this board would be open to spending up to, I'm not saying it has to be this number, but somewhere in the ballpark of $1.5 million until 2025, if that money is guaranteed that if the project doesn't go to completion, we get those funds back? Is that?
That's it. That's what we'd like to try to negotiate, some assurance, some form of guarantee if we can, for that reason.
Chancey. Just let me, I promise I'll get to, let's get through these just real quick and then if I need to come back to them.
It's related to this.
Uh,
What I have to say real quick,
Real
could
quick.
we give the money $1.5 million up front, convey the title, and they own the building, they have $1.5 million to go ahead and get their prelim stuff before they get any grants and loans, then have some feed money to work with. And
Are you saying they give us the 1.5 million or we give them?
we give them money,
Convey $1.5 million.
convey $1.5 million to them. And if they screw up, you know, they're bonded, we get the money back. We give it to them, that way if they've got some feed
With
money.
a bond attached to it. If they don't do it, we get it back.
Yeah, give them some upfront money until they get their grants and all that stuff. Give them upfront money.
How much does it cost us to maintain property that is up for discussion per year?
That include everything, Miss Lori?
No,
Just the,
just the hospital and parking lots. And the helipad.
Broken down.
I don't know that it's broken down exactly like that, but I can give you the lawn maintenance alone is about $32,000 a year. And then in addition to that, you would have some additional expenses, like there would be a minimal energy cost because of lighting and et cetera. Or
Minimal for the main hospital building?
for the grounds, not the building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, the building itself is a big ticket, but the,
Okay.
you meant, am I understanding you correctly, the grounds?
Also.
Oh, you meant the
Yeah,
building
she's talking about the whole
also?
ball.
Okay,
Take off the PT and the wizard.
okay, I'm sorry, Miss Laurie. I was answering you incorrectly. The electrical is 160 a year total. So basically $200,000 for mowing and electrical.
Water, an additional.
Yeah.
Time you add those in, the next biggest one is going to be water and sewer. That's 100. So there's 300 right there.
So basically, you could say even with prices going up, it would be 500,000 a year.
Well, there's only, if you're gonna maintain the building, there's only certain expenses that you can take out. I mean, in this particular budget, there are smaller items, even like postage. You're not gonna use that.
Yeah, but now that would include the helipad, the hospital, and the parking lots for 500,000 a year.
If we take
Is
out
that,
the
is that a good estimate?
building.
Well, the women's center and the PT building are really, yeah, I mean, they're really insignificant in comparison.
Or it's 750 basically. So I mean, we could probably save $700,000,
Probably.
but that also includes insurance, and we take that out, we're down to 500.
We could guarantee them the 500,000 per year for the 2 years.
But I also want that guarantee that if it doesn't come to fruition, that we get that back also.
Yeah.
Well, again, I kind of reiterate what Don Savoy said, and that is look, a lot more discussion on this, but the concept here would be, or the premise here would be, they want us to continue to help. And I know that is something that in the past you have said, we don't want to expend any more money. So if you're willing to at least consider that, that allows us to continue to talk and come up with hopefully a plan that y'all would agree to.
I would like for us to come to consensus tonight, so we can come back in 2 weeks, whenever we have the second budget here. And sign on the dotted line.
Okay, well, that would be up to Mr. Savoy.
Well, I'm saying at the public meeting, Mr. Savoy here, I would like to come to consensus tonight, so we can come back in 2 weeks with a finalized contract.
So you're talking about a number to offer?
I want everything. We started this in January, we're in September, I'm done with it. I believe I said it out loud at the last meeting, I know I thought it
I think you
myself,
did.
that if we didn't come to an agreement tonight, I was gonna propose that we knock the building down, and I'm still gonna make that proposal if we can't come to some sort of understanding tonight.
You're gonna have to beat me to it.
I want everybody to understand that, I ain't a man of my word. I hope we can. Let me make that very clear. I hope that we can. That's my goal tonight. Mr. Kennedy, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any?
This gum is good. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Douglas?
Wrapping my head around it, but I don't have a problem, if it's, again. If we do a number to them, as long as it could be bonded back to us if they fall, it's good to have a nuclear option. So if you guys put all your architects, engineers on it, the board says, no, the political winds change and this thing's gone. We're not sitting there high and dry with $1.5 million just extended for a hope and a prayer, even though that's sort of what we've been doing. I would like it to end. If this is the best way to tie the tourniquet, I'm not against it. If the tourniquet can be cut tonight and we say, here's a hard dollar value, I just don't know what that number is. I think Ms. Chancey's saying it's $1 million. Is that what you understand? That's what I understand. If we,
That's the way.
additional, we're committing to an additional $1 million in operating costs. Are we saying we're going to cap that? Or are we saying we're pushing $1 million over to them right now? I'm sorry, Barbara's thing kind of threw me off.
I mean, I don't, that would probably be a question for legal if we can do that. I don't know if that's something.
I don't know if we can.
If we can legally do that or not. I would. They can figure that out in the next 2 weeks.
Are we then just
Staff can
saying,
figure that
to
out.
answer the question, Dale, are we just saying we agree to up to, we're going to agree in the negotiations that up to $1 million we're fine with, or up to whatever figure it is that we're
That's
fine
what I
with?
would like to do tonight.
Is that the goal?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we can get some parameters that we can work with and we can,
So Don doesn't have to agree to a dollar figure right here and now.
No, we
They
need,
just-
we need to.
We
I
need
think
to.
We need to come up with a roundabout, and then if they come back with it, something else, and we can decide in 2 weeks, and we can scratch it out and write it in and initial, and we change it on the contract that we're signing to. Mr. Robinson's fingers are gonna be tired. Typing up that contract.
Does that sound
Type that well.
what you're thinking about? Is that?
I think that's extremely reasonable and fair. Just so you know, I do have to take it to my board of directors,
Okay.
but it's outside of my scope.
And I don't think. we
But I
can-
don't think we'll have a problem there, as you can tell from the resolution, and they ask me all the time, how's it going, how's the project going? Many of those folks are from this area.
My main goal tonight is, I'm glad that Don and Lauren are here, so we can get some input. I think we need to tell our staff what we want to see finalized in 2 weeks. And I know that's a big ask, but in 9 months.
I was with you. I wanted to be at 0. And dump this thing as soon as they fire a notice of commencement up, we were washing our hands of it.
And time for me to chime in.
Yes, sir.
We haven't even got to number 1 yet.
Yeah, which is a big issue.
Yes, and I agree with y'all, 0. Yes, and if we're gonna donate the property as a taxpayer, first of all, here in Columbia County, how can I say to myself and sleep at night that I just gave away Mr. Chauncey, I'm kind of leaning your way over here, a piece of property plus $1.5 million for the next 2 years to keep it going. I mean, I'm going down to change my phone number in the morning if I think about that. So,
The only reason I'm open to it, and I will say, the only reason I'm open to it is because it's guaranteed that if for some reason this falls through, we're getting that 1.5 million or however much was spent back.
well,
And,
And the problem.
that's why that's why we have good legal staff. I agree.
and
100%, but
if we decide to knock it down, it's gonna cost us that $1.5 million. So that-
we don't know that. That's the unknown.
It is the unknown, but
Unknown.
I wish I could say, and I should have done some more homework on this, but I think that the insurance, if we turn that place into a construction site, in my mind, I can't tell you why, I have no proof of this. I feel like the insurance on that place will come down if it turns into an active construction site. And even if that means we throw a fence up around it and secure the building in a way that it is not secured now. Right now, it's just a vacant building that's pseudo mothballed. If we mothball it and we make it where it's nothing but insured workers' comp people from the architect, engineering firm, mold remediation firm that are entering in and out of there, and that is not open to the public, I would assume that the insurance would go down. Don't know that. So our carrying costs could be limited by that process beginning.
Well, I also think part of this is, I thought we said that we don't want to cover the insurance part of this. That would be,
They're gonna do it.
that would be.
Well, that's what I'm
That,
thinking.
that would be,
And I think I think the carrying cost is gonna go down considerably. We probably won't have to pull the insurance, but I don't think they could be expecting to pay the insurance rates that we are having to pay right now. Number one, we're a government entity, so the rates are higher, period. It's not quite the same for them.
I do want to clarify to your point, Mr. Kennedy. Before Mr. Williams made the point that we're gonna spend roughly $1.5 million to knock the building down. And if we're gonna spend that, but we can maintain the building and have a hospital a mental health hospital for Columbia County, and that money's guaranteed. that if they don't do it, then we'll get that money back and then we use the money they give us back to tear it down. That's the only reason, but I agree with you 100%. I just want to clarify my stance on it, that's the only reason I would be okay with doing this is if it's guaranteed. That if for some reason it doesn't go forward,
We're right back where we
Let me get
started
that
and then
money
we're
back.
out.
I get that.
But I would say this, I'm not going against Dale here because Dale knows more people than I do when it comes to this, but I made a phone call for demo and my number was 3 and change.
Well,
For what it's worth. But
And-
honestly, Dale probably knows than I do about that
No,
stuff.
just to repeat, my number come from somebody I knew in the business. They did not do a written assessment. They come by, they looked at the building. I asked them to ballpark it. They said bare minimum, $1.5 million. What they said,
Mine was a phone call on Google Earth. That's it.
and
So,
you're twice that.
yeah.
and just to correct you, Mr. Chair, no offense, Don, but it won't be a mental health facility for Columbia County. It'd be a mental health facility for 13 counties.
sure.
If I may, largely the northern area, which includes Lafayette, Hamilton, Baker,
Hamilton,
Swanee, yep. So that,
but not Gilchrist, Levy, Dixie, Union.
no, they're pretty much
Alachua.
from the southern counties and the facilities we have down there. Considered a regional draw,
So about 6 out of the 13.
yes. And again, there'll be at least 90 new jobs once we're fully operational. In support of the community here in town, eating, supporting the community. Then we also talked to the college. We just signed another MOU with the college to support nursing and other training at our facilities.
Can we
That
get,
can only grow.
can we get a copy of that?
The MOU, sure, we can get you a copy.
Yeah,
Gateway College.
does anybody? I don't. Want to continue going through this tonight and waste anybody's time if we're not.
I agree.
If in 2 weeks, we're not gonna agree that, hey, we'll spend up to $1 million that could be fully reimbursable if they don't go forward with the project. Is that something that would be a definite no when it comes time to sign the contract in 2 weeks for anybody on this board?
That much money is with me.
It is with you.
Yes, sir.
So we're back to 0.
What, you're at a 0, Don?
I was 0 or a very small amount.
Very small one.
Williams, Mr. Robinson.
So I don't get to make
No,
decisions.
you understand what you're saying? You understand what you're
Yeah, we can draft based on our understanding of your position on these 4 things, but we're really at a point where like 1 may be the biggest.
Correct.
It might be.
We haven't even talked about it, but
And that's why I'm ready. to
if
get
these
there.
4 things are not, if there's not an acceptable position to both parties in these 4, then we're pretty much done.
Right.
And so that's what we've got to work our way through. But
Well, I'd
we
say we
can
weren't
draft.
done because, as Mr. Savoy said, this was an ask. They didn't necessarily say that it was a requirement. It was an ask. From what I'm understanding, it won't pass this board if we come back with the contract saying that we're gonna pay X amount of dollars for X amount of time.
Yeah, based on the conversation, when we have our next conference, I mean, what I would tell Don is, Don, you were there, you heard it. It doesn't appear that there's going to be support for financial, continuation. And then I'm sure he's gonna have to weigh that with what their program is and talk to his board.
Anything else on item number 3? Item number 2 is Marina has provided a corporate resolution authorizing the expenditure of up to $10 million to make necessary improvements to Lakeshore Hospital. Is the corporate resolution sufficient enough to satisfy Lakeshore Hospital Authority trustees that Meridian has made a financial commitment to the community and therefore made a requirement for property conveyance?
Yeah, in short here, I mean, the corporate resolution, at least to me, seems to be strong enough. Sometimes though, people want to see bank letters of credit and other things. Given who our client is, I personally think that the corporate resolution is sufficient.
Probably shouldn't say this on the record, but if we give them the building. It's not our, it's not. It's sufficient
So-
for me, is what I'm saying.
There's a part in one that we'll talk to that too, but as far as that. When you said that you were talking about, we've heard numbers 12, 14 million to patch that thing up. That is also a real number to fix the skin. There's nothing that says, and Don said it too, that was also, he's gonna do it in stages and across the year. I think the number is sufficient for them to limp it along, patch problems as they go. I personally don't feel that that is an insufficient gesture to properly take care and maintain the building and move it forward. I think that's plenty.
Agreed.
Chancey. You have any issues with that? Anything?
We did supply financials to Mr. Powell. On several occasions, he's gone through them. And that commitment to the board from our board came very, very quickly. It was asked for the 1st of June. We had a meeting specific on it. And they were continuing to be excited about the project.
Thank you. Number one, is Lakeshore Hospital Authority Board of Trustees in agreement to convey Lakeshore Hospital to Meridian Behavioral Health Care for an agreement for the sale of real property. The purchase price would be for $0.00, but Meridian will be committing to conduct improvements to the property to obtain a certificate of occupancy and licenses to conduct behavioral health programs to include an inpatient crisis/emergency program, a crisis stabilization unit for children and adults, and inpatient psychiatric beds, which would be 30+ beds, as well as a stabilization unit. As well as a primary care federally qualified health center program. Meridian will also agree to deed restrictions and a reverter clause returning the property to the authority if the property is not used for the required behavioral health care purposes. Since I read all that, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question. First, the deed restrictions, is that for what we discussed and agreed upon, that there would be no outpatient services and that type of thing?
Yes,
Is that okay?
I mean, there may be a IoT component, but nothing, no, what we agreed to was no medication assistant treatment services for addictions. They're strictly inpatient. And we did provide back in May, a 5-year plan of our expected rollout of programs for the entire group.
Or that you just read. Where is that?
In the agenda on the memo.
Oh, it is? Okay, I get the card ahead of the horse here. Okay. There it is. Got it.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I'd say is from an FQHC standpoint, we are not an FQHC.
Can you put that in?
Federal Good Qualified Health Center.
Okay.
That's a status that is very hard to get. We've already one in the county, which there is actually several. We likely wouldn't get that status. Primary care, yes. FQHC, that's up to the feds and how that plays out.
So when you say federally qualified health center, that's a hospital.
No, we had, I don't know that we've got, that came from our language. We would operate primary care, and FQHC is a type of primary care that gets subsidized by the federal government.
Okay.
I just want to be very clear.
Okay.
Palm's a FQHC.
They are the FQHC in the area. We are primary care. We are licensed by ACA as primary care. We just don't have FQHC status for federal rates related to services.
I got you. Thank you. You lost me there with all
I'm sorry.
the letters, but
All the
thank you for the
jargon.
explanation.
I have not changed my stance on sale of property. Don brought it up. I have stated before that the taxpayers of Columbia County own this property. We don't own it. I mean, we own maybe a few grains of dirt there, okay? I do not feel comfortable in giving it away or in selling it. For the reason that we have to answer to the taxpayers. The taxpayers put a lot of time and effort into this. It isn't that we can't use the building. It isn't that we can't redirect. But to look at taxpayers and say, hey, you've been paying us money and we're giving it away. How are you going to answer that in good conscience? Now, when the proposal was first made, it was for a lease. That's what we discussed right up front. You guys came up with the idea. You wanted it. You wanted to buy it. Okay, now you want us to give it to you. Why can't you lease it for 50 years, knowing that you're going to get everything out of it that you put into it? There is an option that can be done like that. We could lease it to them for 55 years and let the first 5 years be without any revenue to us. We could afford to do that and put them in operation. Save them money because they don't have to start from scratch. They've got a building to work with. I mean, I understand part of what they want to do, but they don't have to answer to all the taxpayers in Columbia County. And I do. I live here. I'm happy to live here. I like the people in Columbia County, but I'm not giving their stuff away.
Kennedy.
Um, Want a motion?
We, not yet.
Mr. Savoy, as far as you know, what feedback do you have from your board as to whether they are interested in a long-term, longer than 50, longer than 55, 75, 100 years? Because I think that the Masons gave the hospital authority back in 1955, when I was 3 years old. You weren't even born yet.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
The parking lot or the facility to be used. But would your board entertain the thoughts of a long-term, many multi-years, $1 a year lease agreement?
We had that conversation, Mr. Kennedy, and what it came down to was investing the amount of money that we're going to, not just $10 million, but over a long period of time in facility and property that ultimately would be ours. There's another factor to that. For the last 12 months, I don't know how to say this, we've operated as a board where all 4 people have to agree and make a decision. We don't know what the composition of this board will look like in 10 years time, 15 years time. We didn't own the property. Yes, there'll be deed restrictions obviously put into purchase and sales agreement. But we don't know after we invest, say $20 million, whether that can be pulled out from under us. Again, eliminating services to Columbia County and the region. And the board asked me to come forward with, which was way back in, I think, November and December, purchase and sales agreement for the security of the services that we're going to provide to the community. What we have for the last 50 years that we just flat outgrown. There is no psychiatric possibility. I know I've told you all this before. It really is that whole process. And there's a lot of concern about a community mental health center, regardless of scope and size, investing that kind of money in something that we don't know, that we don't have our hands.
So the short answer would be no, not regarding any long-term lease agreement.
what I said to the staff, the team, the attorneys,
Yep.
Dale,
Right.
was we'd like a decision on purchase and sale before we even consider what is fair.
Okay, you
We got-
say
Real
that you're
quick,
worried about a lease being broken.
Ms. Chancy, hold on one second. Can you keep that thought for 2 minutes so we can switch the tape over?
Switch your tape.
We'll take a brief 2-minute recess.
That's the joke. Patrick always says, "She don't want to go."
All right, we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Ms. Chancy, I apologize for interrupting you, but it's a necessity.
That's all right. Okay, now, getting back to what I was saying. We already talked about the initial idea of leasing. And then we've gone through all this other stuff. I would like to have something like a 55-year lease, 5 years with no cost to you, which would give you some revenue coming in to replace part of what you're putting out and give you some ability to expand a little bit further. Number one, this authority has never called in a lease. Okay. Because we, in good faith, have always rented to people that we felt were a benefit to the community. To those taxpayers I was talking about.
No, well.
Okay, now. There are ways to write a lease, if I'm not mistaken. That you don't have to worry about us all of a sudden pulling it out from under you. Are very legal. Gives you basically the same status with the building and the property as if it was your own. It won't be, but same status, same ability over a long term. We have not been known to ever rent anything out for what a real estate agent says we could get for it. Never happened. In fact, our rental has always been very negligible in anything we've done. It is something that I'd like you to take back to your board and consider, because as things stand now, there is no way I will vote for giving anything away. I'm willing to work. The things, I don't believe in giving things away.
So unfortunately, I don't have a vote, and I hope somebody decides to be chairman at the next meeting, because I'd like to have that back. However, so all I do have left is my voice and my opinion, and it really, at the end of the day, means nothing because I don't have that vote. However, my rebuttal, let me start by saying I would sign on the dotted line right now to give the building to me. And I could look at the taxpayers in the eye tomorrow and answer any phone calls, any text messages, any mail, and say, I'm okay with that, because in the August meeting, I said, that if we don't get to this, I'm gonna make a motion to tear the building down. And I'll have to go back and listen to the minutes, but I'm pretty sure everybody else up here agreed with that. I would rather give the building away to do something good than pay $1.5 million, 3 million, however much we don't know, to tear the building down, then the taxpayers have nothing left. So my thing is, we have somebody in the healthcare field filling a very serious need in North Florida, including Columbia County, which is mental health. I would be fine if I had a vote with giving the building for $0.00. I would also be fine if we did a 75-year lease for $1, but I would rather, because like we talked about earlier, there was something I made a comment about, if we give it away, that's not our problem. For so long now, we've been paying $750,000 a year since 2020 to maintain an empty building. And whenever we started this process, excuse me, the last time we started this process, sure, it may have been talked about a lease or whatever. But this board said that we did not want to put 10 or $15 million up to renovate the building, to get it to where it needs to be for somebody to come in and lease the building. We had a couple proposals. We're gonna have the Disney World of hospitals. We're gonna have a college. We're gonna have Meridian. All of them asked for money. We went back out and said, would any of you take it if there was no money attached to it? Meridian came back and said, we'll take the building, we'll renovate it. I was under the impression, maybe I didn't hear it, but I was under the impression since November, whenever that was for us to give them the building. I didn't think there was any lease attached to it. I would rather not spend the taxpayers at least $1.5 million to tear the building down. I would rather give it away to go to something good, to go to something productive for our community, something that will create jobs in our community and address a very serious issue. I would rather give the building away, not be responsible for $750,000 a year that we're using taxpayers' money to pay to maintain an empty building. Let's give it away. Let's be done with it. Let's focus on the other two buildings we have. If we need to build another building out here somewhere to do healthcare at some point, that's fantastic. I would love it. I'm sure Meridian would love it. I'm sure anybody, any community member would love it if we get to the point where we have to build a new building. This taxing authority, this hospital authority does not need that 4-story building. We've asked how many times if there was hospitals, if there was anybody that wanted to come in here and run a hospital. There's not. We can start. Hey, let's give them the building. Let's focus our attention on indigent care, the whole purpose of this hospital authority. Let's start a clinic and focus on the indigent care for care for the indigent residents and taxpayers of Columbia County. We're spending taxpayers' money. We've spent over $2 million already of taxpayer money just maintaining this dying building. We've got somebody that wants it, that wants to put new life into it, that wants to provide a service and create jobs in Columbia County. Let's do the right thing. Let's give them the building and be done with it. Let's support them. Let's be partners with them. When I say we're done with it, I'm not saying we're not going to be partners with them. They want to have a primary care. We need primary care down here. There's the answer to it right there, sitting on the front row. There's no point. I could look the taxpayers in the eyes much easier and say, yes, I gave that old building away, instead of saying, yes, I spent $2 million to maintain it for 3 years, and I'm going to spend another $1.5 to $5 million to tear it down. I'm done. If we can't come to a resolution tonight, we can't get to some sort of agreement, or at least an agreement to move forward that we're all heading in the right direction. I'm going to make the motion tonight that we tear the thing down. And then I might be in line with Don changing my phone number because I'm wasting another $1.5 million to $5 million to tear it down. Let's be done with it.
Yeah.
Douglas?
I agree. I mean, the deal with the college was the same thing. They wanted the ownership of it. They wanted, my understanding before they walked away was we'd tear it down too. They didn't want the building. We can't find an organization that wants to go in that building. If I'm a taxpayer, I'm looking at this board saying, you did what to the 90 jobs coming here? That's what my concern is. You did what to adding Meridian Healthcare to the tax roll? That's what I'm saying. I think this, in my mind, it was never a long-term lease. It was, we have a dinosaur. It's time we found somebody that has a use for it. As your local, not expert contractor in hospitals. That building, in my opinion, will never be another hospital. The cost to do it, to renovate alone will be monumental. It can serve its purpose as their purpose, but they're not gonna pour money into the thing if they don't own it. And it just, I never knew that we were gonna lease it to them. I assumed we were cutting it loose from the get-go. Was, here it is, take the keys, it's off our hands, we can go focus on what's important. Because I'm with Brandon, if we don't have, I mean, if we don't give that thing away, we need to get rid of it, because right now it is an albatross. It is, I have gotten a couple of text messages from people that I care about that have basically said, how does the board justify spending what they've spent on that building to remain empty? And that cuts. Those are my thoughts at the moment.
Did you ever finish, Mr. Kennedy? I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to hear all of these comments, every one of them, and Mr. Douglas, to correct you, 184 positions unless Mr. Savoy corrects me, because I've got it in my notes here, that's what they were anticipating.
He said 90
184.
earlier. I remember
Well,
136.
we're moving. So 90
New
90 new,
positions.
but a
Yeah.
total of 100.
184 for Columbia County.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, for Lake Shore is what I have here for the lake, for the Meridian of Lake Shore campus, Lake City campus. And then 252 for Columbia County if you count
Count that.
Michigan Avenue down there, Michigan Street, but I agree 100%, Miss Chansey. I understand. I understand completely. But if you'll go back when we were here 4 weeks ago, and when Brandon was trying to make you feel guilty, and you actually looked at him and said, you can't make me feel guilty because you've tried it before. I still love you. And I think if you remember, I asked you what your thoughts were. And you said that you would like to see a long-term lease agreement with Meridian. And then I said, and if they say no, your answer was tear it down. So that's where we're at right there. And I echo everything that our chairman says, Mr. Beal, Mr. Douglas, and I will tell you this, if Mr. Savoy goes back and gets the same answer, no, that they're not interested in a long-term lease agreement, a long-term purchase agreement, let's do it for 50 years, $1 a year. So at the end of 50 years, they own the building, for $50. I'm in favor of that too. But if they say no, then you're going to hear before Mr. Beal gets a chance to make a motion that we request Mr. Williams to get bids, an RFP to demolish the building. So that's where I am, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Nancy, do you have anything to add? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, from the get-go, and I think Mr. Savoy can agree to this. The first meeting that it was mentioned to give something, I said, no, I'll never go with that.
Are you, $1 a year for multiple years has been mentioned.
That's fine, that's a lease.
So if you're not saying 5 years, then it goes up to whatever we have a CHS, 100,000 a year, whatever it was. You're fine with $1 a year for 50 years, 75 years,
I
500
am
years,
fine with nothing the first 5 years,
and then $1 a year,
maybe
don't-
10.
$10 a year.
I mean,
Is that what you said?
I said maybe 10,
10 years or $10?
$10.
The only reason I'm asking is I don't want. I'm gonna come back in 2 weeks for the budget hearing because I feel like I have an obligation to the taxpayers. if Mr. Savoy comes back in 2 weeks, and we can announce that it's not just the budget hearing, that it's also gonna be a special meeting. If he comes back in 2 weeks and says his board has agreed to a 50-year, 75-year, 3,000-year lease at $1 a year or $10 a year. I want to make sure that we're not just wasting more time. We've done
No.
this so, and okay,
No.
that's all I wanted to, that's all I wanted to know. This-
The
are you
only
doing-
thing I have asked for from the get-go is a lease and not a sale or a conveyance of any kind.
So my next question would be, Mr. Williams,
Well, honestly, the key is I don't know when Mr. Savoy is going to be able to talk to his
I hope
board.
he can call an emergency meeting also within the next 2 weeks.
I mean, Don, what I'm hearing is on the 25th, they would like to pick this question back up. And by picking it back up, they would want you to answer whether your board would accept the lease under the conditions described.
And then my second question, just for discussion purposes. If we own the building. What are we responsible? Are we responsible for insurance? Are we responsible for?
They're responsible as the leasing.
Okay,
Well, that can all be set forth.
okay. I wanted to. Ask that question in public. So $1 a year covers everything.
Think that's possible, Don?
We've been operating under purchase and sale, and I've been very clear both publicly with you guys, since I think middle of last year. That, the amount of money we're gonna put into this. Again, we're in the community, we've been in this community for 50 years. We know there's a demand. To answer your question, just like Meridian's board, we operate as a board of the whole. Meaning that anything requires either 2/3 or greater than 50% majority. I don't know that I can recommend to my board right now, the way it stands, that we would lease a property from Lakeshore Hospital Authority. I will certainly bring it to them if that's the will of the trustees. But there's a lot of uncertainty here.
Mr. Robinson, what about a lease purchase? In other words, at the end of the 50 years, if they pay $10 or $1 a year for that 50 years, then they own it.
You could do that.
That's what's chancy.
Huh?
What you be?
They're purchasing it,
Oh, I understand the lease purchase.
right, and they're leasing it, and they're purchasing it.
No.
No, okay. Well,
There are other ways to construct leases. That are just as good as being an owner. You
Okay,
want
but-
me to come speak to your board? I would do it.
I'm not opposed. I'd have to ask the chair. I can't speak for her.
I don't.
Uh-
Probably don't have a meeting within the next 10 days, do you?
Next meeting's the first Tuesday in November. I'd have to call a special meeting. And make sure I can get it over on there.
Wait that long.
You do teleconference at all?
Yeah.
Maybe they could do it before then.
We do special meetings for things like this. We've been operating under a set of rules with staff for 7 months now. And they have a contract in front of them. We got 14 or 18 detail items to resolve in June, which we sent back to staff. We put all that together. I don't know that it's in front of the trustees, but y'all have it. We asked for that consideration before we move forward, or we consider moving forward.
Deed restriction doesn't answer the question. It doesn't. Or a vertical clause, anything like that. they buy the building, if they don't behave in a particular manner, we get it
No,
back?
because then we have to oversee it and that's not fair to them.
You'd have to oversee it if it was a lease.
No, we don't.
Sure.
We lease it to them. They are in control of the property. And as long as the building doesn't fall down, are you gonna go in and inspect the building?
It's still our property. I would think we should.
No. When you lease a house, the person doesn't have the right to walk in the house and look at it.
I lease
Unless
house,
there's
I
a
have
hurry.
I have a right to go look at it.
I mean, you might want to, but no. They lease it, it is theirs to take care of and maintain.
Brandon, I'd like to interject a comment to Lori.
Hold on, hold on 1 second. Do you want to use your 3 minutes now? And please make sure that it's directed to the board and
Okay.
not to.
As a landowner of rentals, you can give a tenant a 24-hour notice and you can go and inspect the property. I wish I had done that with a tenant that moved out that left rats, roaches, and dirty diapers, so you can inspect. And the other thing is people have made comments to me is get rid of the hospital. It's not doing any good. I have not heard any one person say, let's keep the hospital. And if Lori knows these people, why aren't they here in support of keeping the hospital? Thank you.
Mr. Savoy, I would ask that you attempt to get a special meeting with your board so that we can have some sort of discussion at the September 25th meeting.
So you're asking for the negotiations we've had in play to this point for purchase and sale to be put on hold and to look at a long-term lease arrangement?
Yes.
And I also heard Ms. Chansey say a long-term lease arrangement that didn't have the building going to Meridian at the end of a period of time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I will work to have that meeting with the board. I can tell you that based on where we are today, I don't know that I would recommend that to my board.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we instruct staff, Mr. Williams, to begin sending RFPs, bids, request bids to demolish Lakeshore Hospital effective ASAP immediately. And also ask Mr. Williams, let us know at the September 25th meeting in 2 weeks of how soon we can disconnect all services to that to cease any and all payments to the hospital, meaning utilities, security, et al.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second, any further discussion? Is there any public comment? Can we call this since it wasn't advertised?
Well, you really should advertise it, I think, if you're gonna suggest tearing it down.
So I would suggest that we ask staff to advertise the September.
I'll withdraw
25th
my
meeting.
motion.
Thank you. I would ask that we ask staff to advertise the September 25th meeting as a special meeting also. And have the demolition of the Lakeshore Hospital building. You can put it in there.
Okay.
Is that fair?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
That's perfectly fair. Yeah, I would like to have it on the August.
I would love to vote on that tonight, but. wanna
Yes,
make sure we
I
do it
agree.
right.
Yep.
Okay. If we don't have any substantial updates on EMPALS. Go ahead.
Well, of course, Mr. Robinson knows far more about it than I do, but related to where we're at, I know that your legal staff has submitted a list of questions to MPAL's attorney, which is an out-of-state attorney. To the best of my knowledge, as of tonight, they have not yet received a response. So they are awaiting a response on the questions that have been posed. And I think they're planning a meeting, Bruce, is that right? The attorneys?
Well, we tried to get one set.
Okay. So nothing new to report other than we are waiting on information from Empower.
They seem to want some sort of guaranteed revenue stream that Todd and I believe you cannot do under Florida law.
Moving on to unfinished business, discussion of possible action and disposition of the record storage building.
As we discussed in our last meeting, we took the commercial lease agreement that we already had with the county. We amended it to include the record storage facility. The term of the lease is 1 year with annual renewals. I did kick a copy of that over to Todd for review. I did not, or don't recall getting an answer back. So I would ask that you approve the agreement subject to Todd's okay. But we did exactly what we discussed at our last meeting.
I'll get with Todd on that.
I just don't want to have to bring it back.
Wishes of the board. Motion to move forward with the agreement pending Todd's review.
So moved.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. Auto liability, property coverage and workers' compensation renewal.
Okay, as directed by the trustees, Todd, Bruce, and I did contact the Florida Municipal Insurance Trust. We discussed with them our concerns and issues with the value of the Lakeshore Hospital building. After somewhat lengthy discussion, what we learned was that they were not willing, the underwriters were not willing to reduce the value of the building. The value was the value, and if we wanted to insure it from a property insurance standpoint, that's what the premium would be based on. So we then approached, what if we removed entirely any property coverage on the building? They, of course, asked to meet with their underwriters, which they did. They notified us back today that they would be willing to remove property coverage entirely from the Lakeshore Hospital building. And of course, we would continue to insure it from a general liability standpoint. So what this means is they basically would continue to insure the building we're in, the Women's Center, the PT building, a few outbuildings, and et cetera. You would have both property and general liability on all of those buildings, but you would only have general liability on the hospital. What it does to the premium is it would reduce it from the $300,000 renewal premium to a total of $77,028. So hurricane comes through and blows the hospital away,
Save us $1.5 million.
save 3 million on some estimates. But anyway, obviously,
As soon as we get the insurance off of that.
it will come off the 1st of next month. That's when the policy renews. Now, just where you will know, and this was at my request, I had Bruce and Todd research, because there was a school of thought out there that a public entity could not insure a public building. Bruce and Todd researched that and said not true. And of course, a lot of that had to do with issues like sovereign immunity and et cetera. So if that was a concern of anybody's, we put that to bed. But clearly, given that that is a very substantial building, and as we've not had a history of any property type claims on that building, I really think that's your best option. So staff is recommending that you amend your insurance coverages by eliminating property coverage on Lakeshore Hospital building, with an understanding you're maintaining general liability and property coverage on that building and the remainder, and property coverage on the remainder of the buildings.
Motion for that. To approve staff's recommendation.
And that's the cut to 50%.
That's
More than 50%.
77,028 total out of 300, so.
So move to drop the insurance.
Second,
Got a motion, a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. More comments, Ms. Chancellor?
I think you said enough.
Kennedy?
I'd like to thank Mr. Robinson for being here and thank you for your hard work with both of these contracts with Meridian as well as EM Pals. And I'm glad that Meridian was here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Williams, and also for your hard work as well as the two fine ladies that we have here also. And don't let us forget the meaning of today, September 11th, too. Thank you.
I would like to ask staff to start looking at what it would take to set the monies that we have in the indigent care fund into a trust fund that can be used only for indigent care purposes. See what that would look like.
Sure.
Mr. Douglas?
Oh,
I can't help but say it. I'm gonna say it. What Don said right up there was no different than what we would be hearing if Dale came to us and said, here's your option. I do not recommend it. So just so in case anybody's wondering what's gonna happen, that's what's getting ready to happen.
Williams, you got anything?
just a couple of clarifications. One, when we reviewed the hospital budget, you can now go back and adjust that insurance line item, which does reduce that $700,000 cost. And we are a special taxing district. So Bruce, I know there's a little bit different advertising requirement for a special meeting for an independent district. Please make sure that you coordinate with Sonia where we can get this advertised because we're only 2 weeks out. I think we'll need every bit of that because when you send a notice over to be published, it takes a day or two just to get it in.
And they don't publish every day anymore.
They don't publish every day. So I want to make sure that we are advertised properly for your 25th meeting.
Yes.
All right. We've exhausted the agenda. We'll adjourn.